right. This meeting is being live streamed. Oh, we've got Austin Rodenbiker. Is that okay with y'all, our editor?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Totally.
Hi, Austin. We are officially streaming to the YouTube. Mute that. All right. Wonderfully awkward beginning here. Really thriving. And let's see. We'll do speaker view.
Awesome.
And I'm the speaker. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Anar Verald, and I'm the managing editor at Host Publications.
And I am Claire Bowman. I am the senior editor at Host Publications.
We are so honored and so grateful for everyone tuning in and our featured readers this evening to celebrate the publication of But For I Am a Woman by Sophia Stid. And this is our fall 2022 Host Publications Chapbook Prize winner. And whew, what a gift for us to find this in our submittable collection of submissions that we received earlier this year. Truly just such an easy yes, an enthusiastic holy yes. And so you'll listen to the podcast, you'll understand what that means. But we are just so grateful to be here tonight. And we'll be hearing Sophia will be closing us out tonight, Sophia Stid, and kicking us off will be Bea Troxel, and followed by Carlina Duan. And so, yeah, there's a lot to unpack. As many of you tuning in might know, is that we recently lost our friend and mentor and publisher, Joe Bratcher. And so we are moving through this difficult space of grief, but we are so grateful to see this book through and honor Joe and his legacy. It truly is just the best, most beautiful thing that we can do, is to see through the projects that he was really excited and enthusiastic about.
Yeah, and I want to tell just a short story before we kick off tonight with our beautiful readers. But we took submissions for this prize, and we had read them on our own time, and we're scheduling a meeting to come in with our top 3 or 4 that we wanted to advocate for personally between the 3 of us, Joe, Anar, and I. And when we all showed up to that meeting that day, we were all a little cagey and defensive. Like, we had our person and we knew that we were going to have to really like convince the other 2. And it turned out that we were all advocating for the same manuscript, which was But For I Am a Woman. And so it was this sweet little moment where we all realized that we were trying to convince each other of the same thing. And that's just to say how much Joe really loved this manuscript. It's hard to put into words how excited he was by such a unique and talented voice, but also just such a cool project that we were just excited and delighted by. So just very grateful to be here, and we're definitely thinking a lot about Joe. To that end, I want to remind folks that we are going to be holding a birthday reading for Joe this year. It's going to be a virtual event as well, and it'll be in December around his birthday, which is December 16th. So if you want to be invited to that, we'd love to have you. Just sign up for our newsletter and follow us on social media. Those are the best ways to keep up to date with that invitation. So we're really excited to put that together. But for tonight, I think we're ready to get kicked off. What do you say, Anar?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's see. right out the gate, I also want to go ahead and thank Malvern Books for hosting us through their Malvern Books YouTube channel. And I'm sad to say that we are officially out of signed copies of But For I Am a Woman, but there's a few copies available at Malvern Books. So if you live in Austin, be sure to pop in. I don't think they're going to last very long. Gorgeous book. You just like gravitate towards it when you're in the store. And so you got to go in like Tuesday or tomorrow. They're open tomorrow as well. So yes, thank you, Malvern Books. And yeah, without further ado, I would be honored to introduce our first performer of the evening. I was gushing earlier because I'm a huge fan of Bea's music. If you have had a chance to look over Sophia Stid's But For I Am a Woman official playlist, then you will be familiar with Bea. So Bea Troxel is a folk musician from Nashville, Tennessee. Her music draws on the works of Laura Marling, cold water swimming, and watching beavers build dams. She put out her debut album, The Way That It Feels, in 2017 and released her second album, Getting Where, in 2021. She's an educator and in all her work seeks to draw connections between the desperate and the strange. Please welcome Bea Troxel.
Oh, thank you. It's so funny because now I'm just going to look at myself, but it's so good to be here. And thank you for that intro. And Sophie, thank you for bringing me here and for writing these poems. And it really does feel like it's been like a collaboration of like being followed by your words and Carlina's words and having those like with me as I write my songs. And so that's really special. I'm going to play 3 songs tonight. And Sophia and Carlina and I used to go to this service called Compline in Nashville back when we all lived here. And it's like this evening prayer service, but there's a church in Nashville where they light a bunch of candles and there's incense, and the entire service is sung by this male choir, and it's so beautiful. It's like you're like surrounded by candlelight and darkness. And Sophie was saying she wanted this to have a little bit of the feel of that. And so I picked these songs thinking about that and the book. And yeah, so this first song is a new song. And it doesn't have a title yet. How has it been, the listening? How has it felt? I'm back home with my bags on the bed. Back home after a long summer leg. There's too many clothes to lie down. There's not enough food in the fridge now. After a time of moving, you need a little bit of rest and some space to breathe. What if you don't feel it? What if the feeling escapes you? And I know underneath there's a lot to be said. And I know underneath there's a lot to be read. And I can't peel back, I can't peel back the lace. I can't forget looking across the yard, or the water, and saying you were sipping wine, pulling out your journal and writing all the time. I know you loved me. Some things are good. Can you all hear that okay? The guitar. I'm going to take silence as a good sign and move onward. Yeah, so I'm going to play these next two songs together, and I think I thought of them because with Sophie's book, just because there's a lot of questions around, like, what am I going to love? Who will I love? What will I kind of like really spend my time with? And I feel like both of these songs think about that. And also there's like a lot of desire in Sophie's work that I relate to, which this song is also about. So I'm going to play a song called Thesis and lead that into a song called I Want You, both of which are kind of like meditations on wanting things, and it's learning to like embrace publicly desiring things in the world, which is just I'm continuously building on how to do that. It's always changing. And I feel like every time I return the song, I'm like, well, still figuring this out. Is there a thesis to this love that I found with you before? Is there a statement I try to make with my body in the form? Am I to listen? How often it's being said to me? Am I to offer some wisdom to all the ones who come to me? Am I admired for my own ground that I am walking on? Am I growing like a flower slowly unfolding? Do I have enough to grow? Do I have enough to grow? I think I've been holding on when you gave me a hint that you might not be there. Wrapped all your words up in edges as you walk into the bathroom with your phone in your hand. I want you, I want you, I want you so bad. Found it in the bathroom in a dream that I had. Woke up too early with the sheets in my hands. Left you out late, creased on my palms. Left you out late and I left you too long. I want you, I want you, I want you so so bad. I want you. Usually leave at the sights and dust, or the trail of a suitcase left in a rush. This time I stayed and let you choose to go. Oh, babe, I'm so proud of you out on your own. I want you. I want you. I want you. So bad, I want you, I want you, I want you, so bad. And this song ain't sad, I'm learning to want and I want you, so bad, I want you. I want you. That's it. Thank you, Sophie, so much for writing these poems and putting them in the world, and letting Carlina and I be a part of the process. And yeah, they're so beautiful. So excited to hear them read.
Thank you so much, Bea. That was just gorgeous and such a beautiful start. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our first reader of the night. Carlina Duan is a poet from Michigan and the author of the poetry collections I Wore My Blackest Hair and Alien Miss. She received her MFA from Vanderbilt University and is currently a PhD candidate at the University of Michigan, where she serves as the poetry editor of Michigan Quarterly Review. She is a big fan of river walks, snail mail, sisterhood, and Sophia's poems. Welcome, Carlina.
Thank you so much, Claire. And thank you so much, everyone, for allowing me to sit in the space, and a special thanks to Sophie for it's such an honor and a gift to continue to walk alongside each other in poetry, but also in sisterhood and in deep collaborative friendship. And I'm just so honored to be here tonight. And thank you, Bea, for that incredible opening. I was trying not to cry. So I wanted to start tonight by just reading a poem that is from my collection, Alien Miss, which is a poem that is very much in conversation with Julian of Norwich from Sophie's beautiful book, But For I Am a Woman. And I also wanted to say that, you know, when I was creating this first sequence of poems, the Alien Miss poems, that Sophia's Julian of Norwich poems completely influenced my own kind of crafting and thinking alongside Alien Miss. And so the first poem I'm going to read is a poem called Alien Miss Consults Her Past. Alien Miss is an intergenerational speaker figure who's comprised of both me, but also my mother, my grandmother, women in my lineage. And I also see her in conversation very much with Julian. And so Alien Miss consults her past. One thing you should know before I read the poem is that I'm going to quote from an archival document that's currently housed at the Library of Congress, and it is a letter that was addressed to the president. So I'll quote from that document. So this poem is called Alien Miss Consults Her Past. On Angel Island, she finds a bolt of blue linen cloth, moles on the chest, boats men who boarded them, bound for a golden country to pave, to stave off hunger, labor, what's an American dream but a debt, a price to pay, how to say, longing, longing, oh, say, can you see? Vowels opened, bare feet hitting the grass, lawn sprawls of land, touching foot to ground, foot to hardwood floor, water, then more water, slats of light against a lawn wall, saying her own name to a room, holding a pool of water on the tongue, saying her own name to a tree, to another head, its river of hair matted on the pillow, barred from entry, barred from country, barred while carrying a chain link fence, lawful, feral, fearful, what's in the past is in the past is in the past. Quote, that these threats and intimidations and riotous bloody acts in this nation which claims to be a leading nation in intelligence, morality, and culture shock our sense of national pride. The past is in the future in a woman who strips down before crawling into a barrack's lonely bed. Above her, the cloth hangs to dry, goosebumps on the skin, practices saying the words out loud. By the dawn's early light, what so proudly we hailed, what so proudly we hailed, what so proudly, so, oh. So that's that first poem. And I wanted to read it because I think so much of But For I Am a Woman is thinking alongside kind of what it means to write into history, and also what it means to kind of, in some ways, be in conversation with a historical lineage of creation and creating. And so for me, so many of my poems, like I said, were inspired by Sophia's kind of brilliant genius, thinking both about possibility and also about marvel, wonder, awe, all of those things. And so the next poem that I wanted to read is called Possible. And I kind of want to dedicate this poem to Sophia and Bea, just thinking about people in my own creative lineage who have made my own kind of shape-shifting into poetry possible. And so this is a poem that's for Sophia and for Bea, Possible. Now my dress smells like rain, and all day long, I've been eager to get back to my book. A novel about a young couple making pasta and falling into one another's skin. An Irish novel with names of cities that clunk around in my mouth, cities I'd never heard of, but now ride my skull like pleasant, individually wrapped candies, words with strange cactus-like shapes, words I star. Sligo, curricule. I turn the page. My mind goes, stick, stick, stick. My brain goes, hungry for more. Today, I run through the rain in my wooden clogs and pleasure at the sound. Thump, 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 the entire green world of a street flashing down an open sewer drain. So alive, I think, then remember what else makes me possible. Public libraries, cartilage, a good hardcover, a prayer I overhear my cab driver mumble while passing by a full school bus. Goosebumps I get from reading my old journal, one sentence, another. My heart is a skull zone. Did I really write that? And oh, I am possible again. I am a fragrant, silly self. Today, I thank the worms who eat the dirt, who break down the soil, who make the lilacs possible and young, forever purpling, forever cradled in my palms as I cross Blakemore Avenue and it rains, 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 and I think about eating up the alphabet, which has made a city into a word, into a sound, Sligo, which slides, slinky-like, into my brain. The dear alphabet, which has made me into a woman who will cross the street and love the lilacs and treasure the strange turn of the day, the strange turn of a word, a sentence, a curve, and a stroke of black ink that, thank you, brought me here. So that poem is, dedicated to my two kind of beloved creative collaborators. So thank you so much, Sophia, and thank you so much, Bea, for making my own writing life possible. I'm just going to read one more poem here. And the final poem that I want to read, I've actually never read this one out loud before, but I wanted to read it out loud because it's a poem that I wrote. So Sophia and I met, I should have prefaced with this, we met in Nashville when we were doing our MFAs together, and we were in workshop together. And around the same time that we were writing alongside each other, I also started learning about this special kind of women's writing that was found in kind of Chinese history called Nu Shu, or women's writing. And it was a system of writing that was created and used exclusively by a group of women who are in the Hunan province of southern China. And it's actually now an extinct language. And so the last known speaker of this language died in 2004, but these women would write kind of women's books, and they would sort of create these books that they would exchange with one another. And so when women would leave their homes and get married, they would have these books that, were written to them in this secret language from other women who were who use the language. And so I'm reading this poem because I think so much of But For I Am a Woman is thinking also about this kind of constellation of creativity and also awe, and but also a kind of power in what it is to write as a woman. And so I wanted to read this poem and celebrate and serenade both Julian of Norwich and Sophia. So thank you so much, Sophia, for your words. So this poem is called Say a Little Prayer, after Aretha Franklin. Say a little prayer, 1,000 prayers about the red, warm river I catch between my thighs and clamp to stay. Look at me, glinting, the day writing itself all over my ankles. This morning, the slow loop of my arms in rain, 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 shaking my wingspan to release those quick, slick laps. Today, I stand in a bathtub in Tennessee with my mouth, its damp cave. A woman bleeding, a woman making drops of moisture across a floor, wetted by a cloud and hungry after. I peel off my shirt, then reach for the words, lather the spaces between and beneath, conjuring back the language for who I am, what I know, my lips rounding into diphthongs, my tongue taming itself around a word-slick bead. What can a woman's tongue grow? Mammoth garden of consonants and slurred vowels, loose fricatives, and a sky edging its way past the roof of her mouth. The tongue knows. It is daughter of a mother of a mother of a mother. Daughter of their swooning rivers, protection spells, whisks, and metal spoons. A woman's tongue, boat of rage, throne of tenderness, pricked, plucked, depositing firm commands and refusals down a drain. Standing, bare-backed, with everything in my mouth, need and laugh, water and grow, all of the women in me singing, go. Reaching for the small crest of almond-scented soap, I lather my own ridges. The water flashes with pink. Bare and new, wet and hungry, I speak, and it is delicious. Thank you all so much. And I'm just so excited and moved by this beautiful book. I feel like it's so rare to meet a poet who also, is both a soul friend, but is a reason why I continue to write. And so thank you so much, Sophia, for all of your incredible gifts. And please, everyone who's watching, buy this book. It's such an incredible book, and I'm so honored to be here.
Well, thank you so much, Carlina. Those were stunning poems that you shared with us tonight. The final lines of your final poem. Wow, I absolutely need to see your work on the page. I am going to be linking the YouTubers to both of your websites, everyone's websites tonight. So if you're tuning in, please keep an eye on the chat. Thank you so much, Bea. Thank you so much, Carlina. I do want to mention first of all, thank you so much to everyone who pre-ordered But For I Am a Woman. If you have received your copies, you may have already began to read the introduction. And what a gift to us, this book. It really does just highlight the stunning sisterhood that the three of you cultivate and have with each other. And in honor of this sisterhood, we're doing a besties giveaway on our Instagram. And on the 21st of November, we will do like a random, I don't know, the internet lets you like shuffle things. And so I will be doing a random giveaway. So tag your besties and you will get signed copies if you win. And I might be generous, and since we're out of signed copies, I might pick some extra people to win a copy here and there. So I think it's worth your time. But it is just beautiful to witness your friendship and each of your individual arts in this space as well. So thank you so much. If our crowd is ready, should we go ahead and take a 10-minute break and then welcome Sophia on back? Does that sound right to everyone in the party? Okay.
Sounds good.
So if you're tuning in via YouTube, we are just going to pause your screens. And so feel free to walk around, listen to a meditation, whatever that you think you can get done in 10 minutes. I will be back a little closer to 7:45 to tell you where you can find some really great bonus content for this book. But yeah, I'll see you in about 10 minutes. see if I am showing up. Let's see. All right. So our featured readers are finding their way back to us, but I wanted to do kind of a commercial break. So in the chat on YouTube, I linked you out to Sophia's website, Carlina's website, Bea's website. It's rare to have artists have websites, so please take advantage. Everyone has so much going on. You don't want to miss out. If you follow Bea on Instagram, you will be able to find a list of shows that are happening this month. So much going on. Very exciting. I also linked you to the Host Publications link tree. And so what that is, it's just like one place where you can find all the links because we've got a lot going on. So you can find your way to the Host Publications website and purchase Sophia's book through our website, and highly recommend that's where you buy our book because Claire and I package all of our books so lovingly and just like spend a lot of time making snail mail really special for everyone. And so all of our orders include these gorgeous postcards that we made to encourage you to write your pals, and a printed version of the playlist and a QR code on the back. And so, yeah, so head over to our website. Everything on our website is packaged with so much love and care. And so please buy some books. We're going to be having some great holiday sales and stuff too, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And yeah, what else can you find on the link tree? So obviously the Spotify playlist that Sophia made for us. And the Host Dispatch did a conversation interview with Sophia that was just really lovely and has so many great answers to questions you don't even know you have yet. So, and the Host Dispatch editor is Claire Roman. And so Claire knows all the ins and outs of that interview as well. And am I missing anything, Claire?
That sounds right to me.
Okay.
I think you're on top of it.
It's rare, y'all. Rare if I don't have my my list in front of me. But I think the last thing I mentioned was the Besties giveaway that's happening on our Instagram, and that's at Host Publications. It's got our logo. You'll see the Besties giveaway pinned at the top of our page. But I think everyone is slowly coming back. Is that right?
I think so. And I just want to say one thing before we introduce Sophia, which is that we are going to offer a short Q&A little conversation at the end of this reading. So if you're watching on YouTube and you have questions that start bubbling up during the reading, go ahead and get those ready, and feel free whenever you're ready to post them in the chat on YouTube, and I will moderate that Q&A at the end.
Perfect. And if you have a question for Sophia, Bea, and Carlina, those questions are welcomed. So really just bring all the questions if you feel so inclined. And yeah, I guess it's happening. Without further ado, I would be so honored to introduce to y'all Sophia Stid. Sophia Stid is a poet from California. She was the 2019 to 2022 Ecotone Postgraduate Fellow at UNC Wilmington and a recent graduate of the MFA program at Vanderbilt University and Georgetown University, where she studied poetry and theology. She's the winner of the 2021 Bartholomew Prize in Short Prose from Gulf Coast, and has received fellowships from the Bucknell Seminar for Younger Poets and Swanee Writers Conference. Recent poems and essays can be found or are forthcoming in Best New Poets, Poetry Daily, and Kenyon Review, among others. Please welcome Sophia Stid.
Thank you so much, Claire and Anar, and thanks to everyone for being here. I'm so grateful to all of you and to Carlina and Bea for sharing your work. That was incredible. Wow. I thought I would start by reading a poem that actually isn't from the Julian book and then shift into some Julian poems. I want to start with a poem called The Marriage Bed that I actually wrote for kind of in it's sort of a friendship ode. And I feel like a lot of what I was thinking about in the Julian collection is this question of how the past kind of makes us possible, which threads of Carlina's poems also picked up tonight. And this poem is about, what in our present makes us possible. So here's The Marriage Bed. The Marriage Bed. We dragged our beds outside and pushed them together on the porch that first summer we lived and worked in the woods, and slept there under heavy blankets beneath the cedar trees in the cold, high Sierra nights. And laughing, we called it the marriage bed, sometimes stumbling to bed happy and drunk from bonfires the boys lit by the river, the fires where you sang, "This is my body, take and destroy it if you please," while we were learning something different. And because we walked home through the meadow, there were seeds in the seams of our jeans, which we shimmied out of to sleep. Too tired to take off our shirts and bras, and when we woke, our bare legs were cold. And sometimes I'd find your hand in my hair, which was long then. Our jeans and alphabet on the floorboards, dirty, tangled language of the days when we were learning how to be real and hungry, how to eat the nights. We'd sneak into the restaurant where we waited tables and raid the walk-in fridge, shaking cinnamon sugar over sourdough toast, shining with butter, burnt crusts brittle, smoky from the broken toaster. Somehow that bite between my back teeth, always exactly what I wanted. Wait on the line, barefoot, sitting on the counter, swinging our legs, holding tomatoes like apples to our mouths, taking big cartoon bites. Quiver silk of seeds slaking down our wrists, all held yellow in liquid space. And the avocados I ate with so much flaked salt, you said I'd die overnight from thirst. And so I drank long draughts of cold creek water from a jar, and there was always dirt in it, and I didn't care. There was also mint. And that whole summer, I never felt thirsty. We left wet footprints on hot granite, the days we climbed cliffs high over the American River, and held hands and said, okay, and jumped into the muscled water over and over. And sometimes we stood so still in the riverbed that fish swam iridescent into us, tracing our ankles silver. That summer, we learned to walk in the dark without a light. Our muscles were quick and strong and female and always slightly flexed. And we slept in the marriage bed, where a part of me still is always resting. And years after, you wrote to me, you were the first woman I'd ever wanted to be. And with that bed, we made an enormous space for each other into which we will always be rising. Yours the only other body I know the way I know my mother's, the bodies of the women that make me ready for my life. So that's kind of a love poem to friendship, and to friendship between women. And in a lot of ways, I think the Julian project kind of began as a kind of friendship across time and space. So I wanted to start with that poem tonight. So now I will turn to the chapbook. And so for those who don't know, Julian was a mystic and an anchorite, which means that she kind of was sealed into a small room attached to a church where she lived for the last half of her life. That was a kind of consecrated religious life in medieval times. And there she wrote her book, Revelations of Divine Love, which is the first book that we know was written by women in English. And these poems will kind of circle through her life and my life. And a few things to know before I read. So I was thinking a lot about the act of return in copying out medieval manuscripts, how monks and nuns would literally write out the same text over and over again to make copies. and wanted to kind of fold that act of return into the text itself. So the first poem that I'll read kind of sets up a pattern of language that the following poems will return to over and over again. So you'll hear kind of threads from that first poem come back in the titles. And I think I'll kind of read straight through and look forward to the Q&A and to some conversation. Okay. So here is, "But for I am a woman, should I therefore live, that I should not tell of the goodness." Julian of Norwich, 1342 to 1416. There is an anchoress. There is a horn whose song is ink. An anchoress, a writing desk. A woman declared dead for her life's last half. A woman who had herself declared dead so she could write. Ceremony. The bishop walked her to her grave and pointed. Her grave, soft mouth of ground, dug beneath the window of the room where she would live. Enclosure. Clothed in a century of plague, of waiting graves. Enclosed, she was anchored to a space without a door. They built her in. The sound of each limestone moment stacking up upon the last. Inside, she watched the hands of men wrestle in each brick, their wrists rotating stone to find the slot, the right well fit. Dust ground between the teeth of each cayenne stone filled knuckled cracks in skin. What was the sound of the last stone as it was chiseled in? Cloud roar crossed high skies, a mare's huffed maternal breath, field of grain heads moving for once in one direction. What was the sound after? After reading Julian of Norwich, "Remember not to get too mystical now," my grandmother says, sinking the clean word of a knife through a pear. In her kitchen, windows the size of doors, light pours through relentless as water at the river, an endlessness that scared me as a girl, muscle of the world revealing itself between granite, a glimpse, a tear in the fabric. Cut, the pear falls open on the plate. What was whole, smooth-shaped, now reaches out arms of a star. Now leaf-colored skin, grit between my teeth. My grandmother says, "Don't get too mystical." Now I am holding the wrung-wet dish rag, soap lace braceleting the bone of my wrist. I am wearing high-rise jeans. No mystic, I do know this. When the book of the world opens, it is not as we thought. In my grandmother's hands, pears turn to stars. An anchoress, a woman who had herself declared dead and married a room where she would stay until she died. The first woman to write a book in the English language, and what makes her possible is her funeral, held in advance. Archived in my literary genealogy, back in the stacks of what makes this page possible for me, smoke black ink curls into incense shaken over stone, and there a woman lies on her back. A woman lies, listening. They say her name 3 times. She hears with her bones, eyes closed, as the slant edge of a cut feather carves the arcs of her new name, Julian, onto a page made from fawn skin, scraped and shaved until pliable, until it lets in light. She hears the hand that holds the feather slow with care, so as not to bleed ink from the last stroke of the last letter. This is the ceremony, what marries her to a room in St. Julian's Church instead of a man, her name written in the Book of the Dead. The Book of the Dead itself made from the deaths of animals, the blood of ink. Her book, the one she would write here, would be made from this death of hers, this death made of words, of her name. The weight. I spent half my girlhood pruning myself in the cracked bathtub, its tap ringed in copper rust, my back pressed against the porcelain as I turned damp pages in The Lives of Saints for Girls. The alonest way to be alone, door locked, soaking in water, words, and other lives. Every saint in the book was dead, so I believed dying was what made a saint. And I knew I was supposed to want that, to lie still and wait to be made. But I didn't want to die. I read the book to learn how I could live. What would I do when they came for me? In church, they made us kneel as they tried to teach us how to die, to bring the self closer and closer to the ground, now all the way down. Ceremony. The bishop walked her to her grave to make her free. How urgent then to live above the yawning ground that planned to take her in, the tender threaded taproots severed, shovel cut. The tunneling blind creatures wait for her inside her grave. One day they will burrow through her yield, the same way now they eat the dirt. They hold it wet inside their mouths. This next poem kind of revolves around this word that was new to me when I first learned it, matrescence, which means the developmental and psychological process of becoming a mother. So that kind of word holds in it the idea that that process is a process. It doesn't just happen overnight or during a birth or during conception, but it's a process that a woman goes through. And we've kind of lost the sense of that term in psychology and anthropology. So I think it's interesting to think about both why we've lost the term and that term and how we might bring it back. So here's on learning, there's a word for it, matrescence. Become mother, become room, become food, become miracle. The heart of each devours the other's heart. Hurry, become faster. Barely made myself, I knew what they said meant my body was a door, made for someone else to come through. Become sacrament. The commandments I kept, the ones I couldn't keep, all practice before this one. Become sacrosanct. In birth, the pain is not like other pain. In birth, the pain is purposeful and anticipatory. Anticipate. Become vanishing act. Become numb, shaved, cut, split, crazy with pain. Become bare beneath the wide washed lights of medicine and angels. Become everything and so nothing and no one, but a mother, a miracle room, a heart in someone else's mouth. So scholars disagree on this, but some scholars think that Julian would have had children and been married in her life before becoming an anchorite, and that she possibly lost her family in the plague. The Black Death came to Norwich during her life and returned kind of in a cycle. So she lived in a time of pandemics like we do. So this next poem kind of imagines motherhood as a part of her formation and kind of thinks about what that would have been like to be a mother and then kind of enter that kind of silent room. Beneath the window of the room where she would live. Her grave, yes, and also honeysuckle. Its brief sweetness, so drenched in world and dailiness, the casual splash of the chamber pot, that she was glad to have the vine in reach, a reminder of sugar and her own wilding. And later, the years of bearing which she had been, matrescence, and its ending. For when the plague black wings beat down and she wrung out linen for her children, their wilting skin, now and then she straightened up from their dear deathbed, and at the kitchen door, honeysuckle. So she loved it, for witnessing what no one else would or could. And later still, again, its tendrils kissed her skirts as she widow walked long through fields, brambles, from thought to thought, her mind home to God, which made every sense a form of sight. Thus every leaf, nut, vine, each slow miracle, taste and sound and sign. The body's room. The itch, the hunger not to feel hunger, to do it once and for all, whatever it was. Afflicted, those long blue Sunday afternoons, the air outside cold, something inside not quite right, something not fitting. I've been made wrong, I thought, 12 years old, my heart elephantine, my mind repeating itself over and over, my body needing and needing. Is this what people are? Needs and fears, and a house of loss built in the chest. The years I spent trying to leave that body any way that came to me. The doors out rose up from nothing, cost nothing, or so it seemed then. I left and left and left. Now such a long way back. Enclosure, clothed in a body in a century of plague. Oh God, the sense of God, never resting, restless when she wants to leave the chair, the room, her body. I want not whither thou, but anywhere else, but here. Not here, not I. I want my want. Become hunger, God said, already gone. So why am I asking to be made whole, be led back to this flesh, this embattled art, the sense of rose hips, water, salt, meat, every pleasure a pin, a hinge, bring me back in to where I am hungry, only there can I eat. The Book of the Dead. In reading, I understand. Everywhere in writing, there is violence. Any experience described holds inside a kind of death. How astonishing it is that language can almost mean, and frightening that it does not quite. And then how the body scribes, turns parchment, as experience writes itself in, a reflex, a neuron's wet fire. For years, all I have believed is once I believed. Still, whenever I walk into a church, my right hand reaches out for holy water, a reflex, a neuron's long obedience, or its loneliness. My body keeps for me a way of being blessed when I cannot believe in blessing. They built her in the sound of men, male prayer professed, the priest turning his back to her to face God. Latin, relentless river of sound, her knowing flowed over, around. It made her thirsty, but she could not drink. She bent only to feel it recede. Each bell struck in mass rose up like a rock in the rapids, river of lost language, God and men spoke. And so in church, she learned her place was thirst, that she was made for silence, made in the shape of a girl listening. After the Eucharist. Soon I knew we'd all fail, the world rushing back, loud as horses, to fill the space we'd made. But for now, this tenderness, unlocked inside my jaw, to know there in my mouth that a word is food, to know with my mouth how a word became food, became life, became air. I know Julian would have watched the priest take Eucharist instead of taking it herself, his back to her. That turned back a homily. God lived in his mouth, not hers. In my mind, in church alone, Julian listens her way to her knees. The altar asks her for her tongue. She holds it there, wet muscle to stone rough as new linen. In my mind, she likes the taste, as I like communion, how it tastes like clean paper. And afterwards, walking home through fields stitched in brambles, fields that belong to another girl's father, she thinks she might have heard God speak. a language she could have sworn she knew. The last time she stacked linen on a wooden shelf. The last time she watched the teeth of winter pin the river there for dead. The last time she hurled herself into hay to find a golden spine hours later in her hair. The last time she left. The last time she went to market, went upstairs, went burying to be alone. The last time she held a body that her body had made. She thought, this is the last time. Afterwards, she could no longer grasp that way. Around her, time changed, became church, river, linen, ladder, hay. And I think I'll close with this last poem called Before the Fiat, which circles around this idea of a holy no. Before the fiat, what is impossible to you is not impossible to me. Julian of Norwich. Mary said, let it be done to me according to your word. A holy yes. There's no word for a no that's holy, but I want that word. I want you to cross yourself when you hear it, saying the word of the Lord. I want you to kneel and unstrap your shoes, knowing that no makes ground sacred and dangerous. God said no, and Julian said no. And every no I've said unties my life. Psalm in one word, nonstop revelation. I had a wilderness of years when words unsaid choked my throat. God spoke me out. The first word was no, and the sky split, and I could breathe that air. Thank you all so much for listening and for being here. I'm so glad to kind of share this space with you.
Thank you so much, Sophia. That was a beautiful reading. Just gorgeous. So much love in our little Zoom chat and in the YouTube chat. And just a reminder, if anybody is wanting to ask a question, now is the time.
I'm sure that we're going to have some questions within just like our readers this evening, and Claire and I and Austin, who is here in the group with us tonight. While we're waiting on questions to come in, so if you have a question you'd like to share, just drop it in the YouTube chat. But, you know, while we're waiting on buying some time for those people just cobbling their questions together, I do want to go ahead and just do a really big thank you to, obviously, Sophia. Thank you so much for trusting us with your work. We're just so grateful and just so elated to publish you and to work with you. If there are writers tuning in, I want you to know that your publisher should always feel so lucky and like your book is a miracle. If it doesn't seem that way, dump them, move on, find yourself someone that will really value your work, because we couldn't be more proud of the authors that we work with. And yeah, every book is a miracle. I'd also want to thank, obviously, Claire, you're our senior editor. You do a really incredible job, you know, not just working with our authors, but the podcast, and just like when you're a small press, we all do it all. I also would like to thank Austin Rodenbiker, who is our copy editor and here in the Zoom room with us today. I always tell Austin that he makes our books great, and it is very true. Nothing gets past Austin, so if you need an editor, Austin Rodenbiker. We highly recommend. And I would also like to thank Susan, who works with us here at Host Publications, Ian Bratcher, who has really helped us see the projects that we've created to completion, and we're so grateful for that support and guidance. Samantha Sanchez at One Touch Point, who has helped us put together this beautiful book, from the fly sheets to just like all of the details, the paper. We really are just truly lucky to work with such a phenomenal executive or sales executive. Is that a thing? At One Touch Point. She's just Samantha in our eyes. And Casey at Longhand Pencils for individually pressing all of these beautiful pencils that we had custom made. I hope that the portrait that I'm painting this evening is that it takes a village, even for something as what someone might see as small as a chapbook. It really is so many pieces coming together. And of course tonight, thank you so much, Bea, for joining us, and Carlina for sharing your work. We really are just very lucky to be in community with everyone that has made this evening possible.
Oh, thank you, Anar, for keeping us all on schedule and for just having an eye out for everyone's back in the process. You are our fearless leader, whether you like it or not. And yeah, we are ready for some questions. So Sophia, if you're ready, the first question from our YouTubers is from Bellamy Mitchell. I hope I'm saying your name right. Sophia, the experience of an anchorite is so particular. Did you do any research, archival or practical, while writing this? How was that experience of trying to live with Julian?
I love that question. Thanks, Bellamy. Yeah, so I did do kind of both practical research. I love that phrase, and some archival research. A friend told me once that I'm kind of a funny mixture of like an aged Italian matriarch with like 7 children and a monk. It's been kind of like that balance of like loving community life and also loving solitude has been really kind of interesting to work with in my life. And so when I was writing the collection, I actually went to a little one-room cabin at Sundress Academy for the Arts in Knoxville, Tennessee, which I really loved being there. So shout out to them and writers who are here. I recommend their residency. So that was like a week-long residency where I lived in kind of a one-room wooden cabin with just, we had like there were hurricane lamps. There was no Wi-Fi. There was a little porch where I would have coffee. And so I kind of tried to get into the practical sense of that kind of life in a very modified and time-limited way. And that was really, I think, helpful to just think about what living in one room is like, especially without kind of internet and these ways of connection that we have. It feels very different to be in a room where other people can kind of come in versus a room that really is just you. So that was a really interesting and at times hard experience. And yeah, so I've read kind of different versions of the text. We don't actually have the original manuscript that Julian would have written. So we have like copies that other monks and nuns kind of wrote down later. But comparing those versions has been really interesting, thinking about language and how language is filtered through. An interesting thing about Julian is that because she wrote her own book down, and she like a lot of women at the time would dictate books to like chaplains or priests or kind of spiritual directors who would then write their thoughts down. And so the act of her writing her own text in her cell feels really kind of integral, that her hand kind of shaped the words. But now we only have those words from other people.
It's beautiful. And I have another question from YouTube. Your second question, Sophia, is coming from Anna Lena, who says, "What a gorgeous reading. The image of a turned back comes up in a couple of these poems. Could you talk about that?" And then as a secondary component to this question, I'm also interested in how you engaged with her writing. Did you have a practice for reading or being with it as you worked?
Great questions. Thanks, Elena. It's so good that you're here. Yeah, so that turned back, it definitely kind of threads through. In the Catholic Mass at that time, the priest said the entire Mass facing away from the congregation, so kind of facing the altar. And that was part of kind of the theology of that time. And that sense of somebody experiencing the divine kind of through a turned back. And I think for a woman, like through a turned male back, was really striking for me. And that felt like an important image to return to and kind of circle around, and think with kind of awe about the ways that Julian was able to kind of turn to herself, and kind of read her own body and her own experience when she was kind of experiencing the Mass through a turned back. And in terms of kind of returning to the text of the book, yeah, there was a season, maybe a year or so, where I tried to read a different section in Julian's text kind of each morning to kind of start my day. And I would read just, a couple sentences or a chapter and just kind of see which like threads of sentences glimmered out, and which phrases stuck with me. So I tried to kind of weave the text into my life a little bit. And I think that was really helpful. Yeah.
Okay, and Austin asks, Sophia, was this collection ever solely about Julian, or was it always concerned with the nexus between Julian and the speaker / you? And what effect did that genesis or evolution have on the poems?
Yeah, I love that question. So at first it was more focused on Julian, and there wasn't kind of this modern day speaker and thread running through. And then I was curious, around the same time, somebody told me that people don't like to read poems about women reading, which was their unpersonal aesthetic. But that question made me realize that actually the book is about me reading Julian. It's about Julian, but it's also about living with a text and what that does. And so it felt important to kind of fold in the sense of reading Julian's book and her life, and the speaker reading her own body and life and experiences kind of through the light of Julian's book. So it felt like an important way to have a conversation. And I wanted to avoid speaking for Julian. I think that can be so tricky to speak for historical figures. And Phil, especially for people who made silence an important part of their life and solitude, kind of a practice for them, something felt intrusive to me to speak for her and into that. So I wanted these to be like conversational poems and not so much persona poems.
Yes, and I loved talking to you about that on the podcast. Just another quick little plug for the podcast. We did talk about that a little bit, and it was such a gorgeous conversation. Great question, Austin. And then I have another one coming to you, Sophia, from YouTube, someone you might know, I think. Isabel Stid asks, would you consider But For I Am a Woman to be a piece of feminist poetry? Outside of Julian, what were your biggest inspirations for the chapbook?
Thanks, Isabel. Yes, my sister. I think that she's watching from Bryn Mawr College with some friends. So I love that. Yeah, I would think that this is a piece of feminist literature. And some kind of influences and inspirations, definitely Julian's text itself, of course. Adrienne Rich also is a poet that I spent a lot of time with while working on this, for kind of thinking about women's lives, writing about kind of history and how history kind of intersects with the present. I also, some books that kind of came to me later, I mentioned this on the podcast too, but A Ghost in the Throat by Doreen Ni Goifa. That book kind of looks at kind of an ancient Irish poem and a modern day woman's life, and it's really incredible. So that kind of genre of books that weave together like lives and texts, I think, is really speaking to me right now. And there were so many other scholars whose work on medieval mystics and Julian that I read that I cite in the acknowledgements because their work really shaped mine. And I think that Maggie Nelson's The Argonauts also was a book that first, reading that really made me think about writing in conversation with text and kind of putting the experience of reading on the page. And so that was a really big influence as well, but there are so many.
And just one last question, kind of a follow-up to all of that. Oh, and I just have to say, A Ghost in the Throat is so good, and your scholarship is so good. And so definitely, if people are looking to bulk up their reading lists, definitely get A Ghost in the Throat. Darren Negrifa is how I've heard it pronounced, but I have no idea. It's this gorgeous Gaelic name. And yeah, the notes section in the back of But For I Am a Woman is kind of its own beautiful little book in and of itself. And to that point, Austin asks, how do you see the relation between these poems and the gorgeous, deeply researched scholarship in the notes section? And was that always how you envisioned the book?
Yeah, I love that question. I feel like I often turn to the notes and acknowledgements, sometimes just like first when I'm reading. Like I like thinking about books as this kind of constellation. And we're kind of picking up different stars at different times, but it also feels really lovely to kind of see what shape the constellation is making. And so, yeah, I think I always envisioned that I would have a pretty detailed and kind of intuitive note section that also kind of brought up other questions or talked about ways the poems were in conversation with other texts. So that felt like a way to kind of honor the way that the book is sort of about, in some ways, like how we record literature and how we record texts, to have a note section that makes it really a conversation.
I believe that's the end of our questions from YouTube and the chat. Anybody else have any last minute questions for Sophia?
Maybe I could ask a baby question. Is that okay, Claire, if I just verbally ask it?
Absolutely, yes.
Sophia, that was such a beautiful reading. I definitely cried multiple times. I was curious if I wanted to know if there was a specific moment in like the process as you were either conceiving of the poems, writing them, or kind of ordering the chapbook. If there was a moment that brought you closer towards either delight or joy, or towards mystery. And I know those are two kind of separate things, but I was curious if you, if anything's coming to mind for you, either in the spirit of delight or in the spirit of mystery.
I love that. Yeah, and I think it's funny. I feel like we think about mystery as this kind of maybe sort of serious, somewhat like there's probably like fog in the background and like dramatic music playing. But I think mystery often, my experience of it can often be like joyful and just like delighted and curious. The sense of mystery is something that our minds can kind of play with. And I really experienced that while working on this. and thinking about, I think in some ways what makes a mystic is there are people who, instead of kind of reading religious texts or kind of looking to scripture for their spiritual experiences, they kind of read the text of their body or the text of landscape. They kind of turn things that they have direct experience with into texts. And so I think playing with that idea and thinking about kind of what that would have been like brought a lot of delight and joy. Yeah, great question.
I think Anar and I have one more quick question for you, Sophia, which is not to put you on the spot too much, but we'd love to know if you have any other projects in the works or anything else to plug or things to look out for, because of course we want more from you in the future.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm working on some essays, kind of like lyric essays that are almost poems. They're kind of in the space between poems and essays. And one just came out in the Kenyon Review this summer. It's kind of the most recent one. And it kind of picks up, it's called The Virgin and the Pelican, a lyric. And it picks up some themes from the Julian piece, kind of thinking about women and saints and religion in the body. And I'm kind of hoping, I'm working on a kind of larger linked collection of essays of which that is a part. So that's been a really fun and nourishing project to spend time with.
Yay!
Yes, we're excited.
It's so exciting.
We want to sit in the moment, and we're so grateful for this work, but we are so excited about your future, and we really can't wait to get our hands on everything that you have to offer. But Sophia or Bea or Carlina, if there's anything else you would like to plug, now is a great time. In the chat, I will be linking everything all over again, just one more time for our listeners and viewers on YouTube. But yeah, otherwise, feel free to chime in.
Well, I want to just plug Anar's incredible book design as a last thing. And for folks who don't have the book yet, there's a really beautiful image of the reproduction of Julian's cell in the back. And the gold fly sheets are kind of meant to evoke medieval manuscripts. So Anar just did a really kind of intuitive, wonderful, creative job of designing this book. And I'm so grateful to you and to Claire and Austin and everyone at Host. So thank you all so much. And thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you so much. An honor through and through, every direction, within and without. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to everyone that watched this via the YouTube this evening. Thank you again to Melbourne Books. Thank you to everyone in our community that continues to show up and support. We're going to be logging off the YouTube, but I hope everyone has a really great night.